Before Ford became a brand, before it became an industry, before it put the world on wheels, it was a problem nobody else wanted to solve. At the end of the 19th century, cars already existed. That's the part people forget. They were loud, fragile, expensive machines built for the wealthy and the reckless. Toys for engineers. Status symbols for elites. And most people looked at them and thought the same thing. This will never matter. Horses were reliable. Trains were proven. Roads were terrible. Why would ordinary people ever need a car? And into that doubt stepped a man who didn't care about elegance, luxury, or tradition. He cared about repetition, efficiency, and one obsessive idea. If something could be built once, it could be built again, and again, and again. This is the strange origin of Ford Motor Company, and it begins not with speed, but with stubbornness. Henry Ford was not a visionary in the romantic sense. He didn't dream about the future. He argued with it. He failed repeatedly. His early companies collapsed. Investors walked away. Competitors laughed. He wasn't polished. He wasn't charming. He was difficult, single-minded, and convinced that the world was wrong about what a car should be. Ford believed cars weren't supposed to impress people. They were supposed to work. They were tools. And tools should be simple, cheap, and reliable. That belief put him at odds with almost everyone in the industry. Early car makers focused on customization. Ford focused on sameness. While others built cars slowly, one at a time, Ford obsessed over speed of production. Not speed on the road, speed in the factory. And this is where the story turns strange. Ford didn't invent the automobile. He didn't invent the assembly line either. But he did something far more dangerous. He perfected repetition and removed choice. When the Model T arrived, it shocked people not because it was beautiful, but because it was affordable. It wasn't designed to stand out. It was designed to disappear into daily life. Ford famously offered it in one color for years, black. Not because he loved black, but because it dried faster. Efficiency over expression, always. And people bought it. Not because it made them feel special, but because it made them free. Suddenly, distance shrank. Work was reachable. Towns expanded. Time itself felt different. The car didn't just change transportation. It rearranged society. And Ford understood that power instinctively. He raised wages not out of kindness, but strategy. If workers could afford the cars they built, the system would feed itself. Consumption would fuel production. Production would fuel wages. Wages would fuel loyalty. It was brilliant and deeply unsettling. Because Ford wasn't just building cars. He was engineering behavior. He standardized work, standardized pay, standardized products. The factory became a machine that shaped human rhythm. Move here. Repeat this. Faster. Always faster. And the world followed. Productivity soared. Costs dropped. Competitors copied him. Governments studied him. And modern capitalism quietly rearranged itself around Ford's logic. But the strange origin doesn't end in triumph, because obsession has consequences. Ford resisted change even when it was necessary. He clung to the Model T too long. He ignored consumer taste. He fought unions aggressively. His personal beliefs became increasingly controversial. And the same rigidity that built the empire nearly broke it. Ford's system was powerful, but inflexible. And when the world demanded variation, style, and choice, Ford stumbled. General Motors adapted faster. The industry evolved, and Ford learned a hard lesson. Control creates efficiency, but adaptability creates survival. Still, the damage and the legacy were already set. Cities had sprawled, roads had multiplied, oil had become essential. The car was no longer optional, and Ford's strange origin became everyone's reality. A world built around movement, around ownership, around speed, whether we wanted it or not. And now, as this story closes, the question isn't whether Ford was right or wrong. It's whether we ever truly chose this path at all. Because once a tool reshapes daily life, resisting it feels impossible. Ford didn't just build cars, he built momentum. And momentum doesn't ask permission. It carries you forward until stopping feels unthinkable. That may be the strangest origin of all. As Ford's system spread, something subtle but irreversible began to happen. The car stopped being a machine and started becoming an expectation. Roads were no longer built for communities. Communities were built for roads. Distance stopped being an obstacle and became an assumption. Jobs moved farther away. Homes spread outward. Time itself stretched, then compressed, then disappeared into schedules shaped by engines and clocks, and Ford's logic sat quietly underneath it all. Faster production, faster movement, faster life. The assembly line didn't stay in factories, it leaked into culture. Schools adopted bells, offices adopted shifts. People learned to measure worth and output, and slowly, without ceremony, patience became inefficient. Ford believed deeply in order, too deeply. He imagined society as a machine that could be tuned into perfection if every part stayed in place. That belief made him powerful, but it also made him dangerous. He distrusted banks, intellectuals, unions, and anything that introduced unpredictability. He wanted stability, even if stability required force. Surveillance of workers became normal. Personal lives were judged. Behavior was monitored. Not out of cruelty, but control. Ford thought he was protecting his system. What he didn't realize was that systems eventually protect themselves, even against their creators. Meanwhile, the automobile reshaped identity. Freedom was no longer internal. It was mechanical. You were free if you could go. You were limited if you couldn't. Ownership became movement. Movement became status. And soon, the car wasn't just transportation. It was privacy. Escape. Power. The ability to leave without asking. That shift changed relationships, cities, even morality. Distance weakened community but strengthened independence. Responsibility spread thinner. Consequences felt farther away. And all of it traced back to a simple idea Ford made unavoidable. Repeat the same action enough times, and it becomes normal. Normalize it long enough, and it becomes invisible. Competition followed. Other companies learned quickly. They added color, style, emotion, choice. Ford resisted. He believed people didn't know what they wanted. And for a while, he was right. But culture doesn't stand still. It absorbs, then demands variation. When Ford finally adapted, the world had already learned something from his own creation. Loyalty was conditional. Efficiency alone wasn't enough. The machine that had once obeyed him now moved on its own momentum. And that's the paradox of control. The tighter you hold it, the faster it escapes you. The car also rewrote geopolitics. Oil became strategic. Roads became targets. Wars moved faster. Supply chains stretched across continents. And Ford's early dream of independence became collective dependence. Entire nations reorganized around fuel, around traffic that required constant motion to justify its existence. Stopping felt like failure. Slowing felt like loss, and yet the costs accumulated quietly. Pollution, congestion, isolation. A life spent commuting instead of living. Ford never intended this outcome. But intention matters less than impact. There's something haunting about that. How a desire to simplify life made it more complex. How a tool meant to save time ended up consuming it. How efficiency, taken too far, becomes a kind of tyranny. Ford's strange origin teaches us that progress doesn't ask whether we're ready. It only asks whether it can scale. And once it does, opting out becomes nearly impossible. Now, consider this. If Ford had failed completely, the world would still have changed. Someone else would have industrialized movement. Someone else would have standardized production. But the speed matters. Ford accelerated the inevitable so fast that society didn't have time to adapt psychologically. We learned how to build faster than we learned how to live with what we built. And that imbalance still defines modern life. Today, the industry talks about electric cars, automation, and self-driving futures. But the core question remains untouched. Not how fast we can move, but why we need to move so much at all. Ford gave us motion. He didn't give us meaning. We filled that gap ourselves, often without noticing. And now, standing inside a world shaped by his logic, it's worth asking the question Ford never did. At what point does convenience stop serving us and start directing us? Because the strangest part of Ford's origin isn't the factory or the car or the assembly line. It's that a single obsession reshaped how humanity experiences space, time, and purpose. Not through ideology, not through force, but through usefulness. And usefulness is the most persuasive argument there is. As this story stretches toward its end, Ford becomes less of a man and more of a turning point. A moment where the world chose speed over stillness, efficiency over reflection, movement over presence. And maybe that choice wasn't wrong, but it was permanent. And permanent choices deserve to be examined, not celebrated blindly. So when you see a road, a traffic light, a parking lot, or a morning commute, you're not just seeing infrastructure. You're seeing the aftermath of an idea that worked too well. An idea that solved one problem so completely that it created 100 others in its shadow. And that's the quiet warning inside Ford's strange origin. That the most transformative ideas don't announce their consequences. They reveal them slowly after resistance feels pointless.